The story kicks off with a premise that may be a reality check for someone, that is being a loner whose only friend is a cat. That bleak reality gets even worse for our protagonist, Jihun, when his furious dad gets rid of the cat just because some bullies kept calling him to shake him down for money. Just when it seems like things couldn't get any more messed up, Jihun gets hit with a classic game-like summoning. Now emotionally wrecked and broken, he finds himself standing before a king who orders him to save his kingdom from 100 waves of monsters. Naturally, Jihun refuses. Who wouldn't? That's the future that awaits him, but for now, he's still a frustrating loser who might even get on your nerves. You just have to hang in there. It's all part of his character development. The story truly begins with a game called Hell Dream, which promises a whopping 1 billion won prize to the first player who can survive all 100 waves. This was no cakewalk. We find our boy Jihun sitting under a single sad lamp, staring at his books. He thinks to himself that if only he had money, he could have already escaped his boring life. But don't feel too bad for him. Jihun isn't some broke side character. He is the son of Kim Yisu, a respected congressman running for his third term, known for his honesty and public support. And Jihun himself isn't just riding his father's coattails. He's the top student at Korea High School, always locking down the #1 spot. Photos of Congressman Kim Yisu and Jihun are all over the internet, a testament to just how well-known their family is. The next day, Jihun is at his desk scrolling through those very posts when a girl suddenly hugs him from behind. She praises him, saying the photo came out great. Jihun looks at her, totally confused about what she's doing there. She leans in and whispers that she has something to tell him, asking him to step outside for a moment. With no way out of the situation, June quietly follows her and another girl out of the classroom. Watching them go, two of Jihun's classmates stare in surprise. One mumbles that he's jealous, while the other comments that even among model students, it takes someone like a congressman's son to attract girls like that. However, the situation wasn't what those guys were thinking. In the school backyard, the girl calls over two of her male friends and then casually asks Jihun for some money. When Jihun refuses, the girl acts surprised, wondering why he would deny her. Jihun nervously replies that he already lent her 300,000 won just last week and that he couldn't help if she kept asking like this, admitting he just didn't have that kind of cash left. Just then, one of the girl's male friends puts his hand on Jihun's shoulder and asks if he should go ahead and report him. He claims Jihun created an illegal website and threatens that he could rat him out anytime. Jihun's face turns pale as he tries to explain that the site wasn't his, and that he never told anyone to use it. But the guy keeps pushing, saying that even if that was true, Jihun was still an accomplice. Noticing Jihun hesitating, the girl suddenly changes her tone and pretends to panic, suggesting that maybe they should all just go confess to the police. She then asks who would suffer more in the end, clearly trying to guilt-trip him. June becomes nervous as his mind flashes back to the internet photo of him and his father, the famous honest congressman. Sensing his fear, the girl walks closer and leans in, asking if he would really refuse to help. Without waiting for a response, she just smiles and says she's counting on him.
Later that night, Jihun quietly walks toward a locked room in his house where money is kept. He hesitates at the door, clearly shaken, thinking that his father could never find out about any of this. But just then, a voice calls out, asking why he's standing there alone. Jihun turns to see his father, Kim Yuishu, who gives him a sharp look and asks if he has something to say. Adjusting his tie, his father reminds Jihun that the elections are coming up and tells him not to do anything that could damage his honor, saying he should at least avoid becoming a burden. Jihun stays silent, tense and frozen, while his father questions his lack of response. Jihun quickly forces a smile and tells his father not to worry, promising he won't cause any more trouble. But his father responds coldly, stating that there was nothing left for Jihun to disappoint him with. Hiding his reaction, Jihun quietly nods as his father finishes by declaring that Jihun just needed to live by doing what he was told and nothing more. His father states that his life was already decided, and Jihun had no right to make his own choices. Hearing this, Jihun clenches his fists, hiding his frustration. Once he reaches his room, he punches his desk, muttering about what his father actually wants from him and why he's always treated like that. Suddenly, something wet touches his hand, making him jump. He glances down and sees his adorable cat, Ruru. Letting out a breath, Jihun asks if Ruru was worried about him. Ruru jumps onto him and starts playing around, making him laugh as he gently grabs her. He looks at her and admits that whether at school or at home, he had no one else but her. After placing Ruru on his lap, he turns on his computer. His eyes land on the ad for Hell Dream, and he remembers that he has already cleared the 99th wave. Just one more wave stood between him and 1,000,000,001. He restarts the game and tries to survive the 100th wave, but no matter how many times he tries, he gets wrecked again and again. Frustrated, he mutters that he's tried everything, resetting hundreds of times, but it still seemed impossible. On the side, a streamer is also playing Hell Dream on his screen, venting the same frustration. The streamer complained that the wave was basically unbeatable and advised viewers to skip the game altogether. Listening to this, Jihun realized it had been a year since the game's release. Many players, including himself, had cleared Wave 99, but not a single one had successfully beaten the final wave. Still, Jihun stares at the screen with determination. He knew that if there was any way to escape this suffocating life with Ruru by his side, it was by winning that prize money. To clear the 100th wave, Jihun knew he needed the strongest weapon in the game, Rizaldrak's heart, which he had earned from the Wave 99 boss. The item was a god-tier drop, boosting magic attack by 2,000, critical rate by 20%, and critical damage by 200%. He had already maxed out its enhancements. If this didn't work, he might as well give up. But even after using it, he was still unable to clear the final wave. Jihun got frustrated, wondering what more he could possibly do. As he was thinking, Ruru suddenly jumped on his desk and accidentally tapped the screen. Jihun froze and quickly looked, trying to figure out what she just clicked. His eyes went wide. Ruru had clicked dismantle, and Rizaldrak heart was now being broken down. Jihun totally panicked, shouting and watching helplessly as the item disappeared. He grabbed his head, completely overwhelmed, as the screen showed he received 1,000 enhancement fragments in return, which the game gives based on an item's rarity. He stared at the screen, knowing that the only thing he could do now was start over from scratch. The thought of redoing everything scared him, and he wondered if restarting would even change anything. Just then, something else appeared on the screen. An unfamiliar item called Dragon's Soul. Jihun frowned, confused, as this was the first time he'd ever seen it. Normally, dismantling only gives fragments. Curious, he clicked on it and used it, wondering if this was the hidden trick to clearing the 100th wave. His hand hovered for a second before he tapped the screen with a spark of hope. Maybe this time, with the power of the Dragon Soul, he would finally win. Feeling determined again, Jihun decided to start over from the beginning with something new on his side. For the next few days, Jihun was grinding the game like a freak. He even played it in class, hiding his phone behind textbooks while the teacher went on about stuff he didn't care about. After all, if he bagged that 1,000,000,001, who needed lectures about plant cells, right? After some serious grinding, he cleared the 99th wave again. Once he got Rizaldrak's heart, he immediately dismantled it, receiving 1,000 enhancement fragments and 1 Dragon Soul, just as planned. With one last wave remaining, he took a deep breath and started the level, more confident than ever. On the very first try, he won. He jumped up and celebrated, shouting that he had finally cleared the 100th wave. He looked around and called out for Ruru, excited to share the moment with her. But just then, his father, Kim Yisu, entered the room holding a stick and coldly asked what exactly he had just cleared. Jihun froze. His father revealed he had gotten a call from Jihun's so-called friends, who used one small mistake as an excuse to demand money. Hearing this, Jihun hesitated and admitted that he didn't know how to handle things properly. His father walked closer, clearly angry, and reminded Jihun that he had told him not to bring shame to the family. His father started hitting him with the stick, ignoring his cries. Jihun begged him to stop, promising not to mess up again, but the beating continued. During the assault, part of his room got damaged. His device, the one he had just used to clear the 100th wave, was smashed. At first, Jihun didn't even react. He just stared at his father, his eyes filled with silent disappointment, thinking about how pathetic the situation was and wondering what he ever did to deserve this. As his father finally stopped, Jihun wiped his face and asked if he had seen Ruru, his voice trembling. His father, still fuming, replied coldly that Jihun didn't need Ruru anymore. Jihun froze for a second, completely stunned, Then anger slowly replaced the shock as he muttered to himself, wondering if that was really true. Jihun stared straight at his father, not even blinking. His father, Kim Yuishu, maintained his cold look and demanded to know why Jihun was making such a face. Jihun didn't answer, instead just repeating his question, asking once more where Ruru was. His father replied with cruel calmness, suggesting that the cat was probably with Jihun's dead mother by now. The moment those words hit, Jihun's body went rigid. His mind blanked out for a second before his anger completely erupted. His father dropped the stick on the floor and walked out, leaving Jihun alone. Jihun collapsed to the ground and stared at the ceiling, tears falling freely as he thought about Ruru and how hopeless everything felt. Just then, a voice echoed from his broken device, congratulating him for being the first player to clear the game. But Jihun didn't react. He just kept crying, knowing that it didn't matter anymore. There was no reason left for him to run away. Suddenly, another voice announced that Jihun was being invited to the world where the game's owner existed. A strange light filled the room and began to wrap around him. Before he could even think, he was teleported to a mysterious place. He found himself inside a castle, surrounded by shocked warriors who announced that the one who would save them had finally arrived. The crowd began cheering loudly, shouting that the legendary knight was here. Jihun looked around, completely confused, feeling like he'd just walked onto a movie set without reading the script. As he glanced up, he noticed something strange. His eyes were dry. All his emotions felt like they had been reset to zero. Just then, the king of the castle, Boris Georgia III, cleared his throat and asked aloud if Jihun was truly the legendary knight who would protect their kingdom. Jihun stared back at the king and felt a sudden sense of familiarity with his face and voice. A memory clicked, and he realized this moment was an exact replica of a cutscene from Helldream. The king introduced himself as the ruler of the Georgia kingdom and called Jihun their legendary knight, explaining that monsters were attacking from every direction and his warriors could barely hold the line. An urgent messenger rushed to the king and whispered some secret news. As they spoke, Jihun observed them, recognizing that everything, down to this very moment, was identical to the game's beginning. The king then turned to Jihun with a serious face, stating that the situation was urgent and there was no time for explanations. He officially commanded Jihun to take the role of Knight Commander and protect the kingdom. A blue screen popped up in front of Jihun, asking him to choose a faction by either accepting or declining the king's proposal. Jihun announced to the room that whether this was a dream or reality, everyone should listen carefully because he was only going to say this once. He declared that he no longer needed 1 billion won. As he said it, memories of grinding the game with Ruru, who was now gone, rushed back to him. He repeated more coldly that he really didn't need the money anymore. The crowd began to mumble, confused, wondering what he meant. Some even whispered that for a legendary knight, Jihun looked kind of soft. The king also expressed his confusion, but explained that as knight commander, Jihun's job would be to protect the land from monsters. Then he made a more tempting offer. If Jihun agreed, he would be granted anything he wanted. Jihun froze, the words reminding him exactly of his father. Anger began to build inside him as the king continued, telling him not to worry and that all he needed to do was follow orders. That was the last straw. The king's words echoed his father's promises of wealth and honor, and the memory of his father saying he trusted him made Jihun snap. He shouted at the king that he wouldn't do it and refused to protect the kingdom. The crowd was shook. Jihun said that no matter where he went, people tried to use him. Now even here, the king wanted to make him a royal servant with the fancy title of Legendary Knight. He admitted the title sounded cool, but in the end, he'd still just be taking orders. The crowd gasped, but Jihun didn't care. He looked straight at the king and asked if he was really offering wealth and honor, then firmly replied that he didn't need that stuff anymore. He told them all to go ahead and die if they wanted to, and then he hit the decline button. The king's messenger cried out that this wasn't how a knight commander should act. As Jihun rejected the offer, a new message popped up. It informed him that since he refused the human faction, he could now pick a different one. Another notification appeared immediately, stating that a hidden route was unlocked. He could now join the monster faction. Jihun stared at the screen realizing that if he chose this route in a defense game like Hell Dream, it wouldn't be about defense anymore. Instead of building walls, he was now the guy hired to break them down. Before he could process it, the king declared that every choice has consequences. He announced that Jihun was no longer the legendary knight, but an enemy who had insulted the throne. He ordered his warriors to behead Jihun on the spot. As the knights charged, Jihun stood quietly, thinking about how he had only endured pain his whole life. But as they closed in, he unleashed a strange burst of energy, feeling that it was time to stop enduring and start changing things. A notification told him the faction selection was complete. He no longer had human limits. More messages followed. Humans would now be hostile, monsters would be interested in him, and he could now understand monster stats and language. Then the main goal appeared. As a member of the monster faction, he had to destroy the human faction. Jihun looked at the king with a cold stare, feeling like it was finally his turn to go on the attack. Outside the kingdom, a swarm of monsters began rushing toward the walls. The first wave would begin in just 10 minutes. One last notification appeared, and this one made Jihun freeze. The final quest reward would allow him to take one item from this world back to the real one. His thoughts drifted to the day his mother brought Ruru home, and he realized that if he cleared this quest, he might be able to return to those warm days again. Meanwhile, the knights stepped back, shaken. They whispered about the strange explosion of energy, saying the aura around Jihun felt dangerously inhuman. The king stared, thinking that whatever he just witnessed, it wasn't human. But it didn't seem to fit the word monster either. It was something completely unknown. Jihun, on the other hand, watched the guards, realizing this whole faction change was a new variable that never existed in the original game. Still, if the story followed the same pattern, he had an idea of what was coming next. Suddenly, another screen showed up with the main quest, Monster Faction's Oath. The goal was to break through the human soldiers and launch an attack. The reward was a random item box. Seeing all of this, Jihun got pumped up, ready for a fight. Jihun realized this was it. The main quest had finally dropped. He figured that even though the quest details seemed different, the story was still following the game's original progression. According to that logic, an S-rank random knight recruitment ticket should appear next, but instead of a powerful knight in shining armor, an egg suddenly appeared in front of him, wondering if the game was messing with him. He remembered that in the original version, players got an S-rank knight right from the start, not some egg. A message popped up, confirming he had received an S-rank random monster egg as a reward for choosing the monster faction and asking if he wanted to open it. That's when it clicked for Jihun. Since he picked the monster side, it made sense that he'd get an S-rank monster instead of a knight. Without wasting time, he accepted the reward. A small explosion shook the ground as the egg hatched, and the knights froze, realizing Jihun had summoned something. Jihun also stared at the creature, a wave of shock washing over him as he recognized the name. To think the game would give him that beast from the very beginning was insane. It was none other than Rizeldrak, the cold-blooded dragon, the absurdly powerful boss monster from Wave 99. He knew that if a full-grown Rizeldrak appeared in the center of the kingdom, the human faction wouldn't last more than a few seconds. But as the dust settled, Jihun realized something was off. He stared harder and saw it was just a baby dragon. The twist stunned him for a moment, but then it made sense. Since the quest had just started and it was only Wave 1, the dragon must be level 1 too. As Jihun slowly extended a finger, the tiny Rizeldrak gently licked it. Still puzzled, Jihun quietly watched and ended up calling him Lulu, a slip of the tongue referencing his lost cat, Ruru. Just then, Jihun got a new notification. It stated he could now use something called Ruler's Eye through Rizeldrak. He scratched his head, thinking the game was just throwing out fancy names, but another message explained that Ruler's Eye allowed him to check the stats of monsters and items. Jihun nodded, realizing that was actually pretty helpful. Meanwhile, the knights on the ground were getting salty. One of them yelled that Jihun had only summoned a small monster and ordered the army to charge. Jihun narrowed his eyes at them, thinking that at this point, he didn't care if it was a dream or reality. He quickly locked onto his target and put his trust in the baby dragon. Jihun commanded Rizeldrak to use one of his skills, Dragon Breath Level 1. Right before the knights reached him, The baby dragon took a deep breath and fired. A powerful beam of red and black energy blasted from its mouth, launching the knights into the air. The attack was so strong, it drilled straight through the castle wall, creating a massive hole. Even Jihun was frozen for a second, shocked by the power. The civilians inside dropped to the ground, terrified, realizing the attack had just torn through the wall like it was paper. As the knights lay knocked out, the crowd stared at Jihun in fear, calling him a monster. Jihun only smiled, thinking this was way easier than he expected. He remembered the final quest reward. He could take one item from this world back to his own. He knew Helldream had a truckload of items, and among them, there had to be one with the ability he was looking for. For now, his only job was to focus on the mission. He called out to the king, Barris Jordia III, and coldly declared that he was going to wipe them all out for that reward. Without waiting, he commanded Rizeldrak to use Dragon Breath again. A few miles away, a girl heard the explosion and glanced toward the chaos, wondering what on earth was going on. One of her teammates started sprinting toward the castle, shouting for the king to hold on. Back inside, Jihun calmly ordered Rizeldrak to fire again. The dragon paused, looking confused and letting out a soft roar. The knights panicked, with one shouting for the shield soldiers to guard the king with 3 full protective layers, knowing that if a blast like that hit, the king would be toast. As the soldiers scrambled to form a wall of shields, Jihun calmly told them it was totally useless, pointing out that the last attack had already blasted through both their shields and the palace walls. He pointed at the king and declared him the real target. Jihun stood there like a boss, while Rizeldrak let out an angry roar, ready to turn the place to ash. Just then, the teammate who had been running finally charged through the palace gates. The shield soldiers had formed 4 full rows, but Jihun didn't flinch and ordered Rizeldrak to fire. The dragon inhaled deeply, but when it tried to attack, nothing came out but a puff of air. The man who had just arrived smiled proudly, announcing that the king was now safe. Everyone else stood frozen, wondering what just happened. Jihun ignored the man and looked at Rizeldrak, a sense of unease creeping in. He figured it had to be related to mana, just like how knights in the game ran out of energy after using skills. Using his ruler's eye, he checked Rizeldrak's status and confirmed it. Dragon Breath consumed a massive amount of mana, and the dragon was running on empty. Thinking a basic attack might still work, he casually told Rizeldrak to just throw a normal hit at the king. But like before, the baby dragon tried and totally flopped, shutting his eyes and glaring at the ground, embarrassed like a kid who messed up in front of everyone. Jihun thought this would be a cakewalk, but now he wondered if he had no choice but to wait for a cooldown. The man who had just entered finally spoke, asking if Jihun was the shameless punk who dared to target the king. Jihun turned and studied him carefully. He remembered that knights in the game were ranked from D to S. Observing the man, he realized this guy was S rank, one of the elite knights from the 12 zodiac stars. His name was Ares. A nearby guard confirmed it, mumbling in shock that the kingdom's strongest knight had arrived. Jihun felt a wave of nervousness. Ares was no small fry. The king quickly ordered Ares to wipe out the intruder. Ares agreed on the spot, ready to fight. Jihun started sweating bullets, realizing the arrival of an S-rank knight was a serious wrench in his plans. He knew messing with Ares was asking for trouble. As Ares charged, Jihun remembered that out of the 12 zodiac knights, Ares was the one who unlocked powerful area attacks right from level 1, a classic overpowered character. Ares slammed his sword into the ground and activated Flame Wall. The entire place burst into fire, which shot out in a straight line, scorching everything in its path. His own soldiers screamed in pain as they were caught in the flames, wondering why they were the ones getting roasted. Jihun barely hit the ground in time, dodging the attack while protecting the baby Rizeldrak. He calmly recalled how Flame Wall worked. Since he knew he was the target, he was able to avoid the direct hit. But looking at the burning soldiers, he realized something scary. Ares didn't care if his own men got caught in the blast. Ares noticed Jihun was still alive and, with a smirk, called him a sneaky little rat. Eyes burning with rage, he growled that he was going to punch a flaming hole straight through Jihun's heart. Jihun knew Flame Wall was now on cooldown, giving him a tiny chance to counter. But when he commanded Rizeldrak to attack, nothing happened. The move failed again. As Jihun started to panic, Ares charged, leaping high into the air to swing his sword down on him. Jihun looked up in shock, his mind racing for a way out. This battle couldn't end in such a boring way. Right then, a notification popped up, informing Jihun that he had an unclaimed main quest reward, a random loot box. He was stunned, wondering how he could have missed something so important. Without wasting a second, he yelled at the system to hurry up and give it to him. Suddenly, a strange glow appeared right in front of him. Before Ares could strike, a box materialized in front of Jihun and opened up and slowly started to emerge, and Jihun stared in shock, totally confused about what it even was. He quickly activated his ruler's eye. System notification popped up, identifying the weapon, a sword named Hellbringer, and this thing wasn't playing around. It was an S-rank weapon with a magic attack boost of plus 999. The description ominously stated that Hellbringer was a sword of chaos and destruction. Jihun froze, shocked that he had just pulled an S-rank sword from his very first random box. He had no idea who summoned him here. But with this kind of power, it felt like someone wanted him to wipe out the entire human faction. Suddenly, the sword slipped from the air and hit the ground, causing cracks to form around it, or began to break apart, and the palace itself started crumbling. Before Jihun could react, the ground gave way, and he was sent falling straight down. As he fell, he yelled in frustration, cursing the palace walls and wondering what kind of royal building couldn't support the weight of a single sword. As he thought it was over, his fall suddenly stopped midair. He glanced down and realized he was hovering just a few meters above the ground. Confused, he looked up and saw Rizeldrak flying above, holding him by the back of his clothes. Jihun broke into a smile, flooded with relief. He excitedly admitted to himself that he had totally forgotten Rizeldrak was a dragon and could fly. The baby dragon let out a small, proud roar as people below began to shout, pointing at the person flying in the sky. Jihun and Rizeldrak ignored the attention and continued on their mission. As they flew, Jihun turned serious, realizing he had nearly lost his life for nothing. Starting out in enemy territory was the worst beginning possible, but he admitted it wasn't anyone else's fault. He was the one who chose the monster faction. This experience, however, made him clearly understand the power difference between himself and the kingdom. He knew that for now, there was only Ares, but soon, more S-rank knights would rise. He decided his top priority was to get stronger and escape. Elsewhere, Ares knelt on the ground, furious at himself for letting someone who insulted the king escape. He questioned if he even deserved the title of an S-rank elite knight, calling himself useless and pathetic. He muttered that trash like him, who couldn't even return the king's kindness, shouldn't be alive. As he sank into guilt, a palace official called out to him. Just then, someone tapped him on the shoulder and told him the king was calling. Moments later, Ares was kneeling before the king, Boris Georgia III, asking for punishment. But the king calmly told him to stop. He pointed to the sky and noted that the sun was setting, which meant the monsters would soon become stronger. He declared that Ares would lead the war and ordered him to rush to the ramparts to protect the kingdom. Ares accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Jihun continued flying, recalling how the game Hell Dream was forgotten due to its extreme difficulty. He remembered the most criticized part was the first wave of wild goblins, which was nearly impossible to clear without an S-rank knight who had strong area of effect skills. He realized that with Ares and his powerful fire skills defending the ramparts, it was unrealistic to hope the first wave would break through. He shivered at the thought that if an assassination-type S-rank knight had shown up instead of Ares, the fight might have already ended badly for him. Just then, he felt Rizeldrak shaking and saw the ground getting closer. He panicked, telling Rizeldrak to hold on just a bit longer. As he cheered the dragon on, he glanced ahead and froze. A massive stone wall was right in front of them. With Rizeldrak losing the ability to fly, they slammed straight into it. Moments later, Jihun sat up, his back hurting. He was surprised to find that despite the high-speed crash, he wasn't seriously injured. He realized his body wasn't ordinary anymore. He had some serious durability now. Just then, a voice asked him about his identity, pointing out that his outfit looked unfamiliar. Jihun slowly turned his head and went stiff. Standing before him was another S-rank knight, Lib. He began to panic internally. He remembered her well. He had only managed to beat the 100th wave because he understood her true value. Despite being S rank, she was inefficient in rampart defense, so most players benched her. He, however, used her for dungeon grinding and adventure roles, discovering she was the key to his success. She was known as the Abandoned Knight, and now, his former MVP was his first major roadblock. As Lib held her sword to his chest and repeated her question, Jihun met her threat by speaking her name, which made her to pause. He stated that he knew her well, adding that it had taken hundreds of failures for him to understand her true value. Lib frowned and asked what he meant, but he offered no reply. His mind raced. She had been the heart of his winning strategy before, but now the factions had shifted. Meanwhile, outside the kingdom walls, a massive goblin army charged the ramparts. The soldiers there fell into a panic, but managed to shoot down several with arrows and stones. One soldier cried out that they couldn't hold the wall. Just as he shouted for a commander, another replied that Sir Ares was on his way, and a fresh wave of confidence spread through the defenders. Back inside, Lib pressed her sword to Jihun's neck, warning that if he refused to talk, she would decide his fate herself. Jihun knew that in close combat, no knight could defeat her. The thought of killing her to remove the threat crossed his mind, but he knew it was impossible. He raised his hands, putting on a fake smile. Pointing to the sky like a lost tourist, he claimed to be a regular citizen who had gotten lost trying to help with the war. And, before he could elaborate on his story, Rizeldrake flew overhead with a soft roar. Lib's attention immediately snapped to the dragon. Her expression hardened as she looked at Rizeldrake, questioning what a monster was doing there. Jihun's escape plan stalled, but he quickly forced a nervous smile. When Lib demanded to know why a monster was inside the palace, and if it was responsible for the earlier explosion, Jihun felt his stomach drop. His luck, it seemed, was cursed. Lib had spotted Rizeldrake at the worst possible moment. Lib pulled back her sword and began walking toward Jihun. A sense of dread washed over him. She was clearly starting to suspect he was working with the monster. He figured if that was true, there was no turning back, and contemplated jumping on Rizeldrake to escape. He recalled that Lib had no ranged attacks, which gave him a sliver of hope. But as she moved closer, that hope dwindled. She stopped in front of Rizeldrake and stated that she now understood the situation. Jihun could only gawk at her as he blurted out if she was being serious. When Lib nodded, he asked why she had moved behind him. She explained that she had misjudged the situation and now saw he was just an innocent citizen being chased by the monster. She declared it was now her duty to protect him. Rizeldrake, not understanding the conversation, let out a soft baby roar. As Jihun observed, Lib stretched out her arm to attack the dragon. Her strike was awkward, however, and she only managed to lightly tap the baby dragon with her sword, making him let out a small groan. Watching the exchange, Jihun felt a wave of second-hand embarrassment, concluding this must be Lib's true personality. An explosion rocked the area, and Lib's attention snapped toward the sound. While she was distracted, Jihun pointed in the opposite direction and whispered to Rizeldrake that it was their chance to leave. He used the opportunity to escape while Lib headed for the kingdom's main gate. There, she found the gate being smashed by the incoming army. She immediately commanded the soldiers to abandon their bows and prepare for close combat. Despite the archers' efforts, the goblin army kept advancing. A huge goblin with a massive weapon broke through the gate, and the rest of the army stormed into the kingdom. Lib ordered a counterattack, and the two sides clashed head-on. In the chaos, she noticed Ares standing motionless at the side. He seemed to register that as the commander, he should have been there sooner, before the gate was destroyed. With a frustrated shout, he called the goblins fools and unleashed his skill, Flame Wall. With no chance to dodge, the goblins began to burn. Over half of their army was wiped out in an instant while Ares stood there, telling the monsters to keep dancing until he felt better. From a hill outside the kingdom, Jihun watched it all unfold. It became clear to him that his new mission as part of the monster faction was to destroy the human side within 100 waves. He gently patted Rizeldrake, thinking to himself that when he eventually returned, the kingdom would be begging for mercy. Back on the battlefield, the war concluded. The soldiers, alongside Lib and Ares, managed to defeat all the goblins. After one last glance at the kingdom, Jihun turned around and found himself standing before a strange forest. For a moment, his brain couldn't process the change in scenery. He wondered if this was the monster faction's territory. He knew this path had never existed in the game. After resetting Helldream hundreds of times, he understood the kingdom's military better than his own schedule, but he now faced the fact that his game knowledge was obsolete. His thoughts turned to Rizeldrak, who had been with him from the start, and had even saved him from Ares. Before he could say anything, the curious little dragon flew off toward the ground, where Jihun noticed a swarm of ants. He watched the dragon move among them, thinking its behavior was more like a cat than a dragon, before refocusing on his mission. A red screen appeared before him, displaying the main quest, Monster Faction Construction. The goal was to gather monsters and build a faction, with the reward being a random skill. Jihun considered the challenge. He would have to find and recruit low-level monsters like goblins, but the forest was completely empty. On top of that, he questioned how he was supposed to communicate when he couldn't speak their language. Just then, a tree branch shot straight at his face, moving with incredible speed. As it neared his neck, a voice came from the object, calling him a human and yelling at him to die. Right before impact, the object was stopped. Jihun opened his eyes and saw a girl in front of him, her arm having been the blur that looked like a branch. He wondered aloud if she was a beast folk, perhaps a rabbit, given her ears. The girl's expression soured, and she asked if she looked like a cute rabbit, insisting she was closer to a fox. Jihun replied that he never called her cute, which only seemed to agitate her more. He then casually wondered if she might be a white fox, or maybe an Arctic fox. Her expression shifted, and she leaned in to sniff him, catching him completely by surprise. She remarked that it was strange. He looked like a human, but smelled like a monster. Jihun blinked, asking if he really smelled that way. A notification then informed him that 2 passive skills had been permanently activated: Communication, Monster, which let him talk to monsters, and Likeable, Monster, which allowed him to gain favor from them. He was taken aback, realizing he could now communicate with them. The girl, seeing him talking to himself, pointed a sharp nail just before his mouth and demanded to know who he really was. Jihun stuttered, his mind racing. If the Likeable, Monster skill was active, why was she still so hostile? Out of nowhere, a rope whipped past his mouth. He looked over and saw 3 men walking toward him, one holding a bow-like tool. The man cheered that they had finally caught one. The girl shouted that Jihun was a real human after all. As she tried to get up, Jihun saw that the arrow-like end of the rope had pierced her leg. Even with the injury, she struggled to stand, asking if he had planned this with the other humans. He tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, but one of the men had already grabbed the rope and began to pull. The girl was dragged through the air, crying out from the pain, until a bulky man yanked her close and punched her straight to the face. Jihun could only watch. Before the man could celebrate his catch, the beast girl stabilized herself in midair and delivered a clean kick to the side of his head. The big man went down without a chance to react. The sight left Jihun speechless. Despite her smaller size and injury, she had knocked out a huge man with a single kick. The victory was short-lived. She immediately collapsed, her body giving out from blood loss. The old man in the group approached her, asking if the beast really had the guts to kick a human before he started kicking her, telling her to stop resisting. Jihun took in the chaotic scene while the big guy sat up, still dazed. A monster was being hunted by humans. Even though he was now a monster too, Jihun clenched his fists, questioning why they were being treated this way. The third member of the group, their leader, walked up to Jihun and called him brother, asking if he was okay and warning him that this was a dangerous area. The old man was still abusing the girl, who was trying to speak in a language no one could understand. The leader ordered the old man to stop, who then apologized. The leader commented that their group could be a bit aggressive, then mentioned that he had seen Jihun chatting with the beast girl just moments before. And with that, he drove a knife into Jihun's stomach. The man didn't even blink, stating that if he had known someone like Jihun was involved, he wouldn't have wasted his time. Jihun's expression locked, and even the beast girl appeared stunned. He pulled the knife out and threw it to the ground as blood poured from the wound. Before he could speak, a burning sensation spread through his body. The leader told him not to worry, claiming he had avoided all vital organs. As Jihun coughed up blood, He understood the knife must have been poisoned. The leader confirmed it, informing him he now had only 12 hours to live. He then produced a small tube, the antidote, and said Jihun could have it on one condition. While the big guy grabbed the beast girl by her hair, the leader explained that to live, Jihun had to track down the location of the fox den. It was the first time Jihun had heard of such a place. Nearby, Drake remained hidden behind a tree, watching everything unfold. The leader explained it was a village where beast folk lived, and if Jihun helped them find it, they'd spare his life. The beast girl suddenly spoke in the monster language, saying that if she showed them the village, everyone there would be in danger. She opened her mouth to bite her tongue, attempting to end her own life to protect her people. The muscular man reacted quickly, shoving his hand in her mouth to stop her. Jihun watched, registering that she was willing to die to protect her village. She fought back, biting down hard on the man's hand. The leader commented that every beast folk they captured died within a day anyway, questioning how they expected to find the village if they kept killing their leads. Ignoring his own statement, the big guy punched the girl and forced her to sit down. The leader then instructed Jihun to translate a message. If she guided them to the fox den, they would take what they needed and leave, promising things would remain peaceful. Jihun asked what exactly they were looking for. The man gave a half-smile, explaining their boss had lost something, and if they found it, both Jihun and the girl could go free. Jihun recognized the deception in their eyes. It was the same look he'd seen from bullies at school. He knew there was something more to their story, but he felt he had no other option. He couldn't die here. Then he walked toward the beast girl. Speaking in the monster language, he told her he would guide the men to the village, promising no one would get hurt if they cooperated. The men were surprised he could actually speak the language. The girl said Jihun felt different from other humans and revealed that over 100 beast folk lived in the village, wondering aloud if she could really trust him. Jihun avoided her gaze and insisted he wasn't on the human side, asking her to believe him. He added that he also felt these guys were shady, like the kind who would sell expired biscuits at full price. Just then, Jihun's eyes shifted toward the group leader, where he saw Drake silently flying into position behind the man's head. At that moment, the leader asked why Jihun had suddenly stopped translating. As Jihun paused, unsure of what to do, Drake opened his mouth, ready to attack. The old man spotted the dragon and shouted a warning, but it was too late. Jihun silently commanded Drake to use dragon breath. The attack launched, but it completely missed, and the power was super weak. Everyone stared in confusion, even Drake. Jihun wondered if the cooldown still wasn't over. The big guy, however, was terrified. He saw that the grass where the weak attack landed had melted, realizing that if it had hit the leader, it would have been an instant kill. Enraged that his life was almost ended, the leader grabbed his bat and swung at Drake, who failed to dodge. The dragon crashed to the ground. Then, the leader said he would handle the monster himself and told his men to watch Jihun and the girl. As the leader walked closer to Drake, Jihun felt a mix of anger and helplessness. His thoughts drifted back to his school days, feeling like he was still just trying to prove his worth to survive like a coward. He suddenly felt a new motivation, realizing this weight was something he no longer needed. The memory of his father abandoning him and killing his beloved cat, Ruru, hit him hard. Anger built up inside him. He refused to lose anything else. As the leader raised his weapon to finish Drake, Jihun's passive skill, physical monster, activated, lending him power beyond human strength. He dashed toward the leader, shouting that the real thing the world didn't need was him. Right before the weapon hit, Jihun slammed a strong punch into the leader's face. The gang members and the beast girl watched in disbelief as the leader crashed to the ground. The beast girl stared, realizing that Jihun was clearly poisoned but was somehow able to move like that. Jihun walked over and gently picked up the injured Drake, knowing the little dragon had risked his life for him. Looking at him, he was reminded of a child. He suddenly remembered Ruru, the cat who had always stayed by his side and given him strength. He quietly added that from now on, he would always be on Drake's side and would always protect him. As the big guy lifted up their beaten leader, the old man yelled at Jihun, threatening that if their boss heard about this, no one on Jihun's side would be left breathing. Jihun threw them a sharp glare, and that alone made both of them freak out. They turned and ran, with the old man still trying to act tough from a distance. shouting that he'd get his revenge. As they disappeared, Rizeldrake jumped with joy, but the celebration was cut short. The Beast Girl gasped as she saw Jihun's eyes begin to close. His story couldn't end here. The thought of dying scared him. Not for himself, but for Rizeldrake and the girl. His fading mind drifted to a childhood memory of sitting by his mother's hospital bed, frustrated that his father still hadn't shown up. A few hours later, Jihun slowly opened his eyes to find himself in a cave, being carried on the back of the beast folk. Confused, he asked where they were, but she told him to stay quiet and not move. He softly asked why she even helped him. A few moments later, they arrived at a village where she was warmly welcomed. Others from her kind called out her name, Rhea. They announced that Rhea had brought back a human. Jihun found himself recovering in a house, but a bunch of curious beast folk kept peeking through the windows. Some whispered that even though he looked human, there was something fishy about him, while others admitted that for some weird reason, they kind of liked him. Jihun heard everything. He was already awake, but pretended to sleep, feeling too awkward to get up with all those eyes on him. Just then, Rhea noticed the crowd and shooed them away so their guest could rest. One of the beast folk asked if Rhea was really saved by a human. She smoothly dodged the question, promising to explain later. Rhea entered the room and said she knew he was already awake. Jihun sat up, and she told him to forgive the others, explaining they were curious because he looked human but didn't smell like one. He awkwardly noted that the poison's effects were already gone. Rhea nodded, saying they were lucky to have an antidote in the village. Jihun recalled how she had almost taken her own life to stop the hunters from reaching this place. He asked why she changed her mind and brought him here. She casually repeated that it was because he didn't smell like a human. Jihun looked puzzled, asking if that was the only reason. Rhea fell silent, quietly admitting to herself that the real reason was seeing him risk everything to save the small dragon, Rizeldrake. Meanwhile, Jihun mumbled to himself that this must be the power of his likable monster skill. Rhea frowned, demanding to know what he was talking about before scolding him for being too talkative. Just then, Rizeldrake woke up with a big yawn. Seeing him, Jihun suddenly bowed respectfully and thanked Rhea sincerely for saving him. Flustered, she quickly said there was no need, and that they were even since he had also saved her once. A tiny roar from the side caught Jihun's attention. Rizeldrake jumped into the air and flew straight at him. The two started playing like long-lost bros, while Rhea blinked in confusion, wondering what a Rizeldrake even was. She cleared her throat and said that since fate brought them together, they should introduce themselves. But before she could speak, a beast folk rushed in, announcing that the village chief was calling for her and her guest. As they stepped outside, Jihun looked around, amazed by the view of the beast folk village. Warren. Rhea explained that it was originally built by rabbit beast folk, but now served as a home for all who had lost their own. As they walked, a muscular beast folk, built like a gym membership ad, stepped in their path and asked Rhea if she had gone to the forest where humans pass through. She casually admitted she had, but promised to be more careful. Jihun noticed her energy was low and asked what was wrong. Rhea looked straight at him and seriously asked if his name was Hei. Jihun froze for a second before awkwardly saying his name was Kim Jihun. Rhea didn't respond, simply walking ahead and stating her full name was Rhea Lindrian Perniti Saliard. As she continued, her mood suddenly lifted while chatting with another beast folk. Jihun figured she just wanted someone to ask her name. His eyes drifted to a distant mountain as he thought about his main quest: to unite the monsters and form a faction. Rhea called out to him again, telling him to come along to meet the chief. Jihun followed, realizing she had called him Hei again. He wondered what the point of asking his name was if she planned to call him that forever. Soon they reached the chief's house. After a short talk, the chief suddenly announced that from now on, he would leave the village in Jihun's hands. Both Jihun and Rhea were completely shocked. The chief simply smiled, saying he had grown too old. Rhea started to panic, saying there was no way Jihun could handle the village just because of some dream. The chief laughed and said his decision was final. Jihun, however, was frozen. He recalled the chief telling him about his strange, prophetic dreams, and that his latest dream showed Jihun alone would save their village. He connected this to his main quest and felt a surge of nervousness. Was this turning into a disaster arc already? He remembered the hunter's leader saying their boss had lost something important. Something clicked in his mind, and he asked Rhea if they were followed. She paused, then explained that Warren is hidden behind a rocky mountain with the ocean on the other side, and the only other entrance is through a maze of rabbit-dug tunnels, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to find. She said she didn't notice anything strange while coming back. Jihun felt a sense of relief, but his eyes drifted to her leg, which was still bleeding slightly. An uneasy feeling remained in his chest. Meanwhile, the old man from the human gang was following the faint trail of blood left by Rhea. Step by step, he tracked it across the path until he finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. He had found the hidden beast folk village.
Please type mango in comment section to let me know if you watched the video until the end. Thank you for your time. Please give some thumbs up, it means a lot. And see you on the next parts.